Hey, everybody, welcome to the I'm a Man, I'm 40 podcast about the I'm a Man, I'm 40 panel's 24th favorite James Bond movie, which is going to be Die Another Day. My name's Ryan.
And I'm Paul, and I'm the man who ranked Octopussy as the fifth best James Bond film.
Oh, you've kind of spoiled the. Where did you rank Die Another Day?
I ranked Die Another Day as the dead last.
Right. I ranked Die Another Day at 23, and here's Chris Banks. Banks?
Yeah, and I'm Chris, and I'm here to bring a similar perspective to the other two white guys on the panel.
Where did you rank Die Another Day? Yeah. Where did you rank Die Another Day overall?
So I ranked Die Another Day last place.
Right, and by virtue of the fact that I ranked at 23, this is the reason that it sits at 24 overall. Banks, let's give us your takes as we start out here on Die Another Day.
Okay, so in the last episode, I mentioned how I bought the DVD of Tomorrow Never Dies, and it sat on my shelf for the rest of time immemorial. And I can say that this is the exact same situation, that I never have had an inkling or a desire to watch this again, mostly because it was, again, another bloated, boring entry. It relied far too heavily on CGI, and the criticisms we had in the last episode of the suspension of disbelief, the idea that we never really believe that James Bond is in peril because the stunts and the CGI are so fantastical. And I remember a scene with him wave surfing or something that just was so ridiculous and so terrible that I have no love for this film. It has a cameo from Madonna, and I don't think which other Bond films have had cameos of any celebrities? Can you think of any?
Wayne Newton in the License to Kill.
Yeah, is Jimmy Dean considered a cameo in Diamonds Are Forever? I mean, he has a pretty extended role, and he's pretty decent in it.
Okay, so there's some precedent, but there's also just silly crap like invisible cars and just beyond the pale.
Let me just for 1 second interject, and then I'll continue on.
Okay.
I forgot to set the stage on this movie, but just for people, Die Another Day is the final installment of the Brosnan era, the fourth movie that came out in 2002. Brosnan's fourth take on the role in Die Another Day. It was the 40th anniversary, I want to say, of James Bond, and the 20th James Bond film overall. This is how fast they would crank them out, that they would basically average every other year. And this movie, as Banks says, was, I guess, supposed to be, there are a lot of homages to previous Bond films, and it was meant to be this grandiose celebration of Bond, and it effectively killed off Brosnan's Bond career. He was supposed to do another one, and the producers decided they weren't going to do it, and it effectively ended a 20-movie continuity from the 60s up until 2002, where we have the reboot with Casino Royale. So that's a little bit of background for Die Another Day. Please continue, Mr. Banks.
Okay, so I think one of the maybe bright spots, and maybe you can correct me, is Halle Berry's in this movie. Always a Halle Berry fan. She plays Jinx in the film. And also Rosamund Pike plays Miranda Frost in the film.
Yes.
And that's the first time I remember seeing her on screen. She'd go on to have a pretty good career. She's in Gone Girl, and I think Downton Abbey. Is she in Downton Abbey?
I don't know. I've never seen an episode of Downton Abbey.
You have what?
Yeah, that's probably not going to be a hot topic on the I'm a Man, I'm 40 podcast. Retrospective
next,
of Downton Abbey.
We're going to rank the Downton Abbey series next. So
oh, good.
Yeah, I'm going to say there's one married guy on this podcast, and there's one guy who's seen Downton Abbey. They might be the same guy.
Can we just stop the presses and talk about this Halle Berry endorsement? Because
go on.
Blown away by this. Halle Berry is the worst James Bond girl that there ever was, and I'm including Jill St. John. I'm including Carrie Hatcher. She is awful in this, and if you look back at her career, she is awful in everything she does.
Plenty O'Toole was not very good either.
No. But I would take her
Good
over
Night
Halle
from
Berry.
Man with a Golden Gun. She's pretty terrible.
You know what? I can say for Plenty O'Toole, she's barely in the film. She probably has 4 lines, and that makes her way better than Jinx.
Yeah.
I can't agree more. So it's funny. I put this movie on last night, and I always had it sort of ranked second last. And I put it on last night, and I got to tell you, I thought it was pretty fun. I don't care. It's so over the top. It's so over the top. And I was starting to actually enjoy it. It's got an interesting scene, cold open at the beginning that goes on for freaking ever. But, you know, Bond is in North Korea. For some reason, he surfs into North Korea, which makes no sense. But
Is
that's
this the
actual
best way
surf
to
stunt guys doing it. Is that the best way to get into North Korea?
I guess.
When I went that one
Probably.
time,
Is that how
I
you
went
got
in a nuclear submarine. But, no, so that's it. But the cold open is kind of fun. Look, it's action packed. There's hovercrafts involved. There's landmines. There's a lot of shoot 'em up.
Yeah.
You know, it's better by a country mile than The Man with the Golden Gun. And I'm starting to have fun with the movie. I'm enjoying it. I think it's an interesting premise. It hasn't got into the crazy CGI crap yet. And then Halle Berry shows up. And everything that comes out of her mouth is ridiculous. Bond introduces himself as an ornithologist when they meet in, I want to say, Cuba. Because the original, you know, Fleming bases the character of James Bond on this, or the name James Bond he steals from this ornithologist who wrote this, whose name was James Bond. And so he goes undercover in this as a cute little nod to, or wink wink to, you know, Fleming. And then Halle Berry, and this is one of the first things she says. She says, ornithologist. She looks straight at his dick, looks back up and says, well, that's a mouthful. It's funny, and it would be funny if they were playing it. I guess they're playing it for laughs, but it's also it's so on the nose.
Yeah.
You know, why not just say, oh, that's going in my mouth?
Yeah.
It's just like there's no subtlety to any of this shit, and they start banging 3 minutes later.
Right away, and I was watching this scene, and I was so revulsed by this scene. Like she's biting a watermelon, and then she just starts open mouth making out with him. I'm like, that is the grossest thing I've ever seen. Like watermelon particles being passed back and forth. Disgusting.
It's one of the more explicit sex scenes in the Bond films because you actually do see like humping movements.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like thrusting movements, and it's silhouetted like Top Gun, like Kelly McGillis and Tom Cruise.
There's actually very little actual sex in James Bond.
Very
is.
Mostly it's just kind of like the seduction, and then it cuts away.
No, then it cuts back to the pillow talk. James Bond has a lot of fucking pillow talk.
Yeah, so that's how we're introduced to Halle Berry as Jinx, and again, she doesn't have one line that's not corny. She doesn't say anything with any level of seriousness. You're never concerned for her. Even before the movie came out, they were talking about let's spin off Jinx. So you know Jinx is not in any danger at any point, and I find that really frustrating. Banks brings up Rosamund Pike as Miranda Frost, who I like as a character. I think is interesting. She has an interesting turn where you think she's with Graves, then she's at MI6 talking to M, and then again there's a turn where it turns out she's some kind of a double agent or something like that. She looks incredible in this movie. She's 23 when this movie is filmed. Pierce Brosnan is 49.
Yeah.
Nobody bats an eye. Nothing said about it at the time. So I find that a little bit jarring when we see these really young women. Halle Berry's probably in her mid to late 30s at the time.
Right.
So I think this movie has some elements to it which elevate it above some other movies. I might even put it a little bit higher if I were to have ranked after watching it last night. Yeah, the CGI is horrible. But it's laughable, and this movie is so over the top it becomes amusing to me.
You look
This is just a bad trend in movies that I think kind of begins in this era where instead of doing the actual work in stunts, you take CGI, which looks way less realistic, and you put it into these action films, and again, it just ruins the sense of danger. So I really have a hard time with the substituting CGI for actual real effects. And real effects are just much harder to do.
They're much harder to do.
It's just kind of laziness, you know?
It is lazy, and one thing I notice about it too is that I don't expect Pierce Brosnan to be Tom Cruise and be strapping himself to missiles like in the Mission Impossible franchise, but I expect him to do some of the stunt work, and he does none of it. He probably does less than Roger Moore.
I have to disagree. Now, Roger Moore, to me, is the person who does the fewest stunts. You see Brosnan fighting in this movie. He does a lot of the fight scenes himself, where it's
I don't
clearly not a
know.
stuntman. He gets in this big fight, and look, it's so unmemorable that I can't remember the context of who he's fighting or where he's fighting. But he gets in this really long fight scene, and there's knives involved, and it's exciting. I actually thought it was really good the way they inserted, like Brosnan actually did a bunch relative to Roger Moore, who if you go back and watch, literally they will not have Roger Moore when he's standing in Live and Let Die on that crocodile pad. Like it's just he won't even stand on the crocodile. There's no crocodiles around. They've just clearly got a stunt guy, and it goes like he turns his head so fast. But Roger Moore, it's when we get to A View to a Kill, it is ridiculous how much of it is done by stuntmen. Like it's so bad.
Also, we grew up with the VHSs of these films and seeing them on cable, and now you got big TVs and you got Blu-ray quality, and it's so obvious with the Roger Moore films that he is not the guy. It's like the guy is like not like 3 inches taller or just completely not him.
40 years younger.
Yeah, it's really sort of revealing the wizard behind the curtain. Unfortunately, the quality of the Blu-ray and the high definition resolution. I will say, because that's one of the downsides. One of the upsides is all of the opening title sequences. If you get those in super high definition, well, parts that were blurry before are pretty unblurred now.
That's a lot of nipples.
One or two. So
I will say, Ryan, I agree with you. If for maybe the first 40 or 50 minutes of this film, you're kind of thinking, "Oh my God, this could be a fun, over-the-top film." But then you're so worn out later on, and you're more than Tomorrow Never Dies. I was just hoping this movie ended. I was done with it.
Yeah, I will say it drags, and so the introduction of Jinx is frustrating. The cameo, and it's kind of an extended cameo by Madonna. I'm sure she was only there for a day, but she's horrible. She's really bad, and you don't buy her. I mean, she's the fencing instructor. She delivers her line. She's never been a great actress. She just hasn't improved since Shanghai Surprise or whatever, Desperately Seeking Susan or whatever mid-'80s Madonna garbage.
Dick Tracy.
Who's that girl?
Dick Tracy's probably her best role, but still horribly miscast. The movie I like that movie. It would be a lot better with somebody who wasn't
Madonna.
Absolutely.
And we don't have to mention her horrible song. I guess you've already talked about it, but that's
we haven't. Well, we haven't in this, and this is our Die Another Day discussion. So go ahead. Madonna, I guess, is commissioned to do the song, and maybe through that, she's like, "Well, I'll do the song, but you got to put me in the movie."
Right. I think I mentioned it last time. This is like you can go up a few notches in my rankings if I really like the song to the movie, and I think this song cements it as my last place because it is the worst, maybe the worst song ever recorded, not just James Bond song. She just name dropped Sigmund Freud in that song to make us think the song is like deeper. I don't get what she's going at with this song.
Sigmund Freud. Analyze this. I do hate it, but I will when I listen to all the James Bond theme songs, which is shockingly like a lot. I have a playlist on Spotify. I do rarely skip past it.
Okay. Is it like a guilty pleasure or?
It's a lot of work to go and skip past the thing.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm putting here's Pierce. I will say Pierce looks. I mean, he's almost 50. Pierce still looks very good. Still, I think the prettiest of the James Bonds. I don't know. I still don't know where Banks is coming from. Halle Berry is very attractive, but terrible in this movie, and it really makes me wonder. She's won an Oscar. Is Halle Berry a good actress or not?
No,
because
she
also
not.
did Catwoman.
I think I confused this film with Monsters Ball. Sorry, that's my bad.
You conflated Pierce Brosnan and Billy Bob Thornton.
It's a dead ringer.
Yeah, there's similar sex scenes. I do think there's a few there's every over the top element. They tried to take it up a level and a level and a level and a level. You got this guy. I guess this guy's name is, I can't remember this guy's name, Zhao, but he's got the diamonds in his face.
This movie, this franchise is obsessed with fucking diamonds, and I wrote that down as my number one note because for like the 5th movie I watched, there was some subplot involving diamonds. Enough with the diamonds.
Yeah, I mean, Gustav Graves comes out of nowhere, and though to ruin the plot, he was a North Korean, the son of the North Korean dictator, and he's thought to have died in the cold open. And it turns out, lo and behold, there's some plastic surgery studio in Cuba, of all places, where he has transformed himself into, a very Aryan-looking white man with a British accent.
Right.
Yeah,
Playing Kim Jong-un, essentially.
yeah. I
Essentially,
mean,
he's
it's
playing Kim
sure.
Jong-un.
It's
Yeah.
a lazy setup, and this guy has come from nowhere, and he has billions of dollars. And the premise is, I guess, something to do with diamonds. I have no idea, but somehow he has all these diamonds, and therefore he's rich.
Right.
You're right. Diamonds come up constantly in these films. We should have a running tab, but it's at least 5 movies, and I would imagine it's probably like they're in Octopussy. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, they're in Living Daylights. Obviously, they're Diamonds Are Forever. I think that if you look at it, there's going to be a full half of the movies will feature diamonds in some way.
I think you're probably right, and I don't know why that is, because they're not really that exciting to me. Just
I
as
think the
as a
Broccolis have
MacGuffin.
right. I think the Broccolis probably have a stake in De Beers.
Yeah, I would assume so. Also, I would like to point out this horrible leather cat suit that she wears in half the movie.
Right.
Tragic. Just a tragic outfit. Brosnan looks great. I think there is one suit he wears in this movie that is pretty good. Brosnan's, I will say, his outfits of all the Bonds don't age the best. There's some more stuff from the 70s is pretty garbage, but some of it is fairly timeless. So, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, there's another trope in this film that comes up that they really need to retire. It's when James Bond goes like undercover somewhere, and immediately like the henchman gets like a dossier on James Bond with his like license to kill. The jig is up, man. You can't do undercover work anymore. It's time for a desk job, all right?
That's occurred to me as well. I've thought that several times. Like, and he's always introducing himself as James Bond. And everyone knows who James Bond is. Everyone knows everything about him. It's like,
right.
What kind of secret agent are you?
Right. Even Christopher Walken on his like MS-DOS was like, James, like
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, James Bond, license to kill. First, I have a question about the license to kill though. So if you fly to Croatia and you kill like a warehouse full of henchmen, and the cops arrive, are they like, oh, it's okay, can I see your license for these corpses? Right? Like, where is this? I don't understand. Who issues these licenses? Where is it valid? How do you get them renewed? Is there an expiration date?
Yeah, but does MI6 have jurisdiction over the entire world? He frequently murders people into 40 different countries, and no issue with him murdering people in every single one of those countries.
Right.
Diplomatic immunity.
I just can't figure out how this works.
Yeah, no. Well, that is confusing. I agree that everyone figures it out in about 5 seconds, despite the fact that he'll cleverly change his name sometimes.
Right. Yeah,
I'm James St. John Smythe. No, I'm James
That's
Stock.
my favorite.
James Stock.
That's my favorite pseudonym. You do a kill.
What's the fake company he works for too? Something.
Universal Exports.
Universal Exports. Okay, by now everyone knows the jig is up with Universal Exports. It's a front for MI6.
It's a latex exporting company.
Yeah, exactly.
A subsidiary of Vandalay Industries. All right, guys, that's Die Another Day. I think, truly, I know, Paul, did you actually watch it this time?
I did.
You did it, but Banks, you haven't seen it, right? So, all right, Paul still ranks it at 25. I do think it's better, less sleepy than some of the Moors. I feel bad for Pierce. Do you guys think that they should have given Pierce a better send-off than this? And Pierce is my least favorite Bond, but he loved the role so much. He did not leave willingly. He's one of the Bonds that just did not go on his own terms. He was so upset. Could they have reset it, like For Your Eyes Only? Could they have done something where they brought it back to Earth and given him a chance to maybe introduce some better elements, or did Pierce go at the right time?
No, I think you're right about that. I think that there was an opportunity with his last film to kind of reboot it, and maybe in a more pared down way, and focus a little bit more on story and location and development, and they went in the complete opposite direction and screwed it all up. And I'll read a quote that I found on the interwebs that I think you guys that sums up my feelings about this film. So this is from film critic James Berardinelli, who says, quote, "This is a train wreck of an action film, a stupefying attempt by the filmmakers to force-feed James Bond into the mindless XXX mold and throw 40 years of cinematic history down the toilet in favor of bright flashes and loud bangs."
Yeah, that sounds about right. I will not verbatim quote Roger Moore when he said, like, this movie was ridiculous and I was on the moon or something like that in Moonraker.
Yeah,
right?
and I was in space.
Yeah. Right?
This movie went too far.
When Roger Moore has taken a shit on your movie, I will say I feel bad for...
That's Sir Roger Moore.
Okay. I feel bad for Brosnan. By all accounts, seems like a really nice guy.
Yeah.
I think that he was always disappointed by the material he was given. So yeah, it would have been nice to see him get a decent script. But to be honest, I think he's Remington Steele. He's not James Bond. Doesn't have enough of an edge.
I do agree with everything that you just said. I can't help. I have a lot of regrets about the James Bond series, and especially some of the movies that were in production that didn't get filmed because of there's so many legal issues surrounding this franchise as a whole. I think because Casino Royale doesn't come out till 2006, hey, give Pierce a send-off in 2004. It's not like it's hard to write these scripts, or get him involved, because he said many times, he's like, I have a lot of things that I wanted to bring to the character that I really couldn't. And just give him some kind of interesting send-off. And especially if they had known they were doing a reboot, you could end that James Bond timeline, which had been going from 62 up until 2002. And that was the end of 40 years of continuity, which, Pierce is somehow 49, which means that he would have been 9 in Dr. No. It still was canonical. They still attempted to sort of have this premise that, because you have recurring actors, Q is in it up until the movie before this, where you have the same actors coming back over and over. So presumably it's the same character. If they're running with that, give him a proper send-off, either kill him off or, put him out to stud, or send him to Skyfall with Albert Finney. Who gives a shit?
Right.
Just do something interesting wherein,
John Cleese in this one?
He is, yeah.
So
He's fine.
Which was the first John Cleese?
The World Is Not Enough.
Where Desmond Llewellyn and John Cleese were in the movie together, wasn't there?
Enough, I think.
Yeah, that's The World Is Not Enough.
World Is Not Enough. Okay, so
yeah,
that's
which
the
is
one.
a better movie than this one. But that's sort of the last thing I have to say about it. Is like, I think it's lousy to do Pierce like this, because he is a nice man. There's got to be. I think there must have been something in there, and I would have liked to see just any other take, his actual take on Bond, and seeing, like, really if he was sort of unleashed, what he could do with that character, given that he had so much time. And he was sad to leave, and I would have loved to see just closure to that timeline. And they just never did it. Like, the end of it is him and Jinx, sitting in a boat, just saying, and then there's some garbage closing line to it as well, and I've even forgotten what it was, but it's like they had to close every one of these James. Oh, I remember it. She's like, I'm so good, and James is like, so good, and she's like, yeah, especially when I'm bad, or something stupid, just something so terrible, which makes no sense whatsoever. And they're playing with diamonds. They have all this foreplay where he's like dumping diamonds on her like the rose petals in American Beauty. And it's just insulting to the James Bond fans out there.
That hurts.
People stuff
hard.
It's this whole Jack Tripper like double entendre where you don't see the camera on them, and she's like, take it out. It's still in there. It's a little rough. And then it's kind of moves over to, and it's like there's a diamond in her belly button. Come on. You got John Ritter to write this script? It's crap. It's crap.
Knock on our door.
Yeah. Get Suzanne Summers in here. Get Joyce DeWitt.
Stay tuned for a Three's Company retrospective.
Yikes. I want to cover the Priscilla Barnes years.
Those are my favorite. The Halcyon days.
Yeah.
Priscilla Barnes is at License to Kill. So there you go.
That's correct. There's the crossover. Priscilla Barnes. Oh my God, she plays Felix Leiter. I knew there was a Three's Company tie-in. There's only 1 degree of separation between Three's Company and James Bond. Sweet. The producers of Die Another Day just said, like, let's go with this, right? Let's really, really dig in on this. All right, guys. I think that's enough that needs to be said about Die Another Day. Anything else you want to leave the the James Bond fans with?
I think I covered all my notes.
I'm super happy that we've done these 2 movies.
And we're halfway through the Brosnans. There's only 2 more Brosnans
we're
that
gonna
be discussing.
Like we're basically, once we finish The World Is Not Enough, I actually want to talk about all the rest of these films.
All right.
These
Fantastic.
first 2 ones are brutal.
I still think it was fun to talk about. To me, a terrible James Bond is better than a lot. If you're looking at action films from the 90s or 2000s, I still like to watch this movie.
Okay. I don't.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, well, that is it for Die Another Day. I'm a Man, I'm 40's retrospective of all 25 James Bond movies will return with The Man with the Golden Gun.